Hi everyone, my name is Patryk. I'm a producer at QLOC, and I'd like to tell you of the time we, as QLOC, have joined Senua on her journey through hell and beyond. Our studio was responsible for bringing the remastered version of Hellblade to Xbox Series consoles and the PC. So, here's a brief summary of the presentation. We'll talk about our core premise when approaching this particular project, along with some initial challenges we've had to face and overcome. Then we'll get into some ins and outs of our approach and our schedule, followed by delving deeper into some of the visual enhancements we ended up adding to the game. Then I guess we'll tie everything together with some final thoughts, and if time allows, we will finish this presentation with some brief Q&A. Okay, but first, what exactly is Hellblade? Hellblade could easily be described as a story-driven, third-person perspective melee action game developed and self-published by Ninja Theory back in 2017. The game features a female protagonist, a Celtic warrior named Senua, and is set in early Middle Ages, specifically around the time of Viking invasion of Orkney Islands. So that's first half of 8th century, give or take. Talking about the genre, this is what the game appears to be on the surface, just from looking at some screenshots, watching some trailers, or browsing a Wikipedia page. But, truly, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is so much more. First of all, it is a masterpiece of immersive storytelling, confirmed by stellar reviews and multiple awards, including 5 BAFTAs received in the year of its release. The game art style is beautiful, the story is intimate, and the environments varied yet consistent. The game touches on rarely explored mature themes of mental health, religion, and abuse in a profound yet visceral way. So, how do you approach a game like this? Many people who play through Hellblade describe it as an experience rather than a game. And I agree, this game is not gamey at all. First of all, it's got no heads-up display, it's got no UI, it's got no button callouts, tutorials, or objective markers, and the gameplay elements, such as puzzles and combat, have been incorporated into the narrative so seamlessly you can barely tell them apart. It is a journey, a slow burning descent into the nature of grief, loss, and despair, and a cinematic experience in the truest sense of the word. So, what can be done to further enhance these values, these themes and concepts, without altering the original experience? So let's start with our core premise, our mantra for the remastered version, which was make it look the same but better, or make it look better but feel the same, or more specifically and present it as a question, how do you make the game that is already visually stunning look even better without altering the original feel? Well, that's funny, but it's not as simple as it sounds. It's basically as someone saying, I want it same but different. Of course, you could follow the easy route, upscale the resolution, bump some textures, and then call it a day. But yeah, obviously that's not what we wanted to do. You can also notice the 2 distinct words being repeated in these sentences on the screen right now, which is looks and feels. Well, looks, that's an easy thing, right? You can manage looks pretty easily. You can all pretty much agree on something that looks good, especially in terms of video game graphics. But feel, well, that's a different animal, right? Feels are highly subjective and hard to grasp. So, having that in mind, let's have a look at some of the main challenges we've had to face, especially at the initial stage of the project. So, first, how do you make the alterations substantial enough so that the players can see them, while also subtle enough so that they do not alter the original Ninja Theory's vision? Second, how do you make players extra happy and excited about the updated version? It's only been 3 years since the game's release, after all. Third, how do you implement ray tracing on Unreal Engine 4 for Xbox Series consoles. Next, how do you make it all run smoothly on the consoles, especially the Series S? And of course, how do you fit it all into a tight schedule? So, facing these challenges in order. Senua Sacrifice is a very tight and focused game. The environments are very consistent, as I said before, so the overall number of assets is rather small. So we've had to be extra careful as we adopted a holistic approach. Basically, if we change this a little bit here, will it not affect the game on the other side of the map or on an altogether different level? Well, thanks to our previous cooperation with Ninja Theory, as we've been working on DMC and porting Hellblade to Switch, which is kind of funny because that was the exact opposite of what we are doing now. We are downgrading the game first, now we are upgrading it. We enjoyed a great degree of creative freedom and trust, and that helped us speed things up along the way. Well, our initial thought was the game is perfect as it is. There's not much room for improvement. Well, ray tracing was an obvious first pick, followed by improving the overall performance. But what else can be done? But then, yeah, we started taking a closer look at things, delving deeper, brainstorming, and minor spoilers for what's coming next. Boy, did we come with some awesome ideas. All right, managing player expectations. Well, that's a tricky one. For us, it meant playing the game and playing it a lot. Even though some members of our team have played the game before and greatly enjoyed it, now we wanted to come back to it with a more critical and evaluative eye, basically looking for areas that could be improved. We also performed an extensive research at the very early stage, basically checking out players' expectations, complaints, and issues they might have experienced in the original game. Well, essentially only one major thing came up, and that was the game's incremental progress over a single save file. While very immersive, especially on your first playthrough, it did not allow players to revisit sections of the game they have already completed. So that's not a huge deal in itself, but the game featured a certain collectible achievement awarded for finding all the lore stones hidden in the game world. And there's been like 40-something of them. So if on your first playthrough you missed a couple, you basically had no other option than to finish the game, right? There was no retracing your steps, no going back, no previous save to load. You had to finish the game first and start it from scratch. And if on your second playthrough, and let me tell you, some of those lore stones were really well hidden, if you missed them again, well, tough luck for you. So, as it turned out, at some point later on, Ninja Theory asked us to find a remedy because they were aware of this complaint. And by the time they approached us, we already had a full design document ready for the chapter selection with like lore stone counters and split into levels, everything. So we also added a controller sensitivity option as we felt it missing in the original game, which later on led us to creating a fully fledged accessibility package for the game. And obviously, both the NVIDIA's DLSS and AMD's FSR would have to make their way into the PC release eventually. From the get-go, we also wanted to have ray tracing also available on the Xbox's little brother, Series S. Even though we weren't certain at that time whether that would be at all possible, we are super motivated to make that happen, as was Microsoft. These were the early days of the series generation of consoles, so we've had very little idea on what to expect in terms of performance and power. Of course, we got the numbers, but you need to check some things for yourself. Going next to technical upgrades, well, this portion will be handled in detail by my friend Paweł in a separate presentation. We are preparing it at QLOC right now. Suffice to say that we've had to dedicate a considerable amount of time to upgrading the engine, going from Unreal Engine version 4.15 to 4.25, along with all the middlewares and dependables. That was basically the requirement to having ray tracing implemented later down the line. Game performance, well, yeah, coming back to game performance. First, we started by running several profiling passes, basically trying to answer the one crucial question. Can the new Xbox run it with all the extra eye candy and not blow up? Yeah, it didn't, so that's a good thing. Then an extensive process of optimization started that lasted pretty much throughout the entire project cycle. We found a sensible middle ground during our POC days, and then fought really hard to maintain this delicate balance between looks and frame rates. We have also followed the original Xbox One X's upgrade to Hellblade in creating 3 separate quality modes for Xbox. That helped us provide a good experience for every type of player, whether you prefer image fidelity or high frame rates. And talking about schedule, we started off by creating our proof of concept build, trying to check what level of visual fidelity would be feasible on the target hardware. We also split the development process into 2 branches, one for our technical artists, another for our engineers, and decided to go with Xbox first, finish it up, preferably in time for Hellblade's 4th anniversary, then follow it up with PC version. So, having moved past our initial challenges, let's have a look at our approach in detail. As mentioned before, initially we felt that the game is complete in terms of visuals, a consistent experience. But we didn't want to simply slap ray tracing on top and then call it a day. So, upon closer inspection, we started uncovering places that could actually be improved. And to give you an example, this is a screenshot from our proof of concept level of choice, but focus on these oil lamps. That's the first thing we've noticed, right? The color is quite cool, right? So we decided to add some flickering effect and warm it up a bit so it looks more like flame. You'll see the transition going, yeah. So I know that talking about flickering on an image still is a bit silly, but bear with me for a second. All right, that's nice, but another thing is missing. Where are the shadows, right? There are no dynamic shadows. This is an open flame, so these lamps should cast shadows of their own, but they don't. So let's add dynamic shadows. That's another thing we've added, and yeah, they immediately add some extra ambience to the image. Yeah, otherwise these oil lamps, they just look like 2 light bulbs suspended mid-air. Okay, so the image gets more interesting with each iteration, but when we finally hit play is where the magic happens. Well, suddenly the entire scene comes to life, becomes more dynamic, more natural and immersive. So yeah, slowly but surely we've applied this process to every little bit of detail in the game. This is still our proof of concept level of choice. So first thing, looking at these wooden beams. Well, they've been sitting in this, there's not a lot of contrast in the image, but hopefully you can see it. There's not a lot of transition between the level of the swamp, the algae, the slime, and the wood, right? So they've been sitting in the swamp for ages. We should add some additional layers of algae. Another thing is, well, this is a rainy area, so the environment should feel wet and drenched. All objects should be slightly darker and shiny. We've even gone as far as to tweak roughness inside cracks and crevices, as this is where water would naturally gather. Another thing is, visible right here, the transition here also feels off. Like the water surface is just a solid gray color. There's no depth to water. So we tried to amend that. Yeah, added depth to water, make the materials appear darker and shiny, and add some additional algae. So that's exactly what we did. Okay, so from this point onward, we used baby steps in implementing new visual enhancements. One of the first decisions we decided to make was not to alter Senua's appearance in any direct way. Instead, we decided to influence how she looks in an indirect way by improving the environment she's in. We have also paid extra attention to all the visual clues that may guide the player towards a certain path. Things such as light scattering, light shafts, Dillion being visible from a certain distance, flickering light somewhere on the horizon, a solitary torch at the end of the tunnel. Well, we made sure to preserve all of that. We've also spent a lot of time running 2 builds side by side, basically pitting our version against the original. At times, we've even been running up to 4 builds at a time in a 2v2 tile over a huge TV screen, just checking various solutions and tweaks in runtime. Gradually, the entire team got really excited, coming up with new tweaks and ideas. We basically told our technical artists to explore freely and do whatever they want, as long as it is consistent with the original game and its visual direction. Let me tell you that the vast majority of ideas just kind of popped up as we moved along. All right, so the entire team was likewise very eager to provide constant feedback on whatever was being implemented at the time. We used to host a lot of internal streaming calls, dubbed Development Support Cinema, where one person would stream the game running in an editor, and all participants would help with fine-tuning the settings and providing live feedback. Well, it got to a point where every little visual change had to be approved by someone, preferably a couple of someones, preferably the entire team. So we greatly enjoyed this camaraderie, this common effort to make the game the best it can be. We've adopted an internal codename Onion for the project. Yeah, that's not very epic, I know, but we felt that it matches our approach, which is moving slowly while peeling it off layer after layer. Initially, we also assumed that this whole process will involve a fair amount of crying, but yeah, that was avoided, luckily. All right, so these were our keys to delivering a successful project, the 3 cornerstones of Hellblade's remastered version. We've assembled a team of highly talented and experienced specialists. Still, and as a bonus, all members of our team managed to learn new things over the year we spent developing the updated version. Next comes engagement. Basically, all members of our team became highly invested in the game and its looks. We managed to ignite a passion for the project so that everyone was genuinely doing their best to make the game shine. Initially, of course, there was a lot of tug of war between our technical artists and our engineers as they waged the age-old war of performance versus quality. But that brings us to the next element. Well, the entire team has been working together to provide constant feedback on each other and bring new ideas to the table. So, that's teamwork, right? Teamwork cannot really exist without communication. That's an obvious statement, really, but, well, let me tell you, yeah, you may don't know, but Hellblade's remastered version was done entirely via remote work. So, we've had to use a lot of varied software for supporting different means of communication. So we've used Teams, obviously, for video calls and channels, but we also used Mumble for ad hoc communication and maintaining team relationships. We've even set up a dedicated room called Canteen, just for casual chit-chats over a cup of coffee. We used Discord for after hours, as we used to host gaming nights every now and then, just to vent the pandemic. And a wide variety of undisclosed streaming software for remote connection. And then on top of that, already mentioned development support cinema, usually as a mix of Microsoft Teams and one of the streaming tools. Basically, we wanted to avoid the situation where our team members would start feeling like they got trapped in the solitary confinement of their homes. And we also wanted to avoid them working in bubbles. So we wanted the ideas to flow freely, and yeah, we want them to provide this constant feedback on each other. So we got people who became highly invested and engaged in the project, providing constant feedback and new ideas to each other. So that's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, so let's put it all into a calendar. Let's see how it all fits into a timeline. This is a basic overview of our timeline. Basically, start with proof of concept build, gather as much information as you can, assume a long alpha stage, polish everything in beta, have it released on Xbox, yet again, preferably in time for Hellblade's anniversary, then follow it up with PC version. Delving into detail. As soon as we've had the editor up and running, we've decided to split development into 2 separate branches. One for our engineers, called Dev, and another for our technical artists, called Art. The thinking behind this was that we wanted our artists to have a somewhat stable environment to work with as they tweaked the visuals, preferably from day one. At the same time, our engineers could focus on updating the engine. Changes made on dev were then moved to art selectively after careful verification by our dev support team and the final approval by our project lead. So basically, art became our final branch with stable editor, reworked visuals and assets, and cherry-picked changes from the dev, which was at the time a constant conglomerate of alterations, temporary fixes, code merges, and obviously all manner of bugs. The initial POC only contained one map. You've seen it already, the Swamp Shard Trial, as it was very small and very varied, basically a vertical slice of the game's visuals. The game at this point had no gameplay, as we are focusing solely on the environment and on confirming whether our initial assumptions about the project timeline were correct. So, this was our pre-production stage. It lasted for about 2 months. We've gathered all the necessary info and moved on to alpha. Well, here our engineers began moving the entire game onto Xbox, while also adding some additional new features to the editor as requested by our technical artists. Our technical artists, in turn, basically repeated the process done during POC, but this time spread onto all the game's levels and cutscenes. They've also started coming up with new ideas, as some of those were level specific. At this point, we are still working on 2 separate branches, dev and art. So this was the long stage of the project. It lasted for 5 months, as assumed, and was concluded with us moving out of alpha and onto beta. Here we have finally moved our entire team onto a single branch. Our engineers became busy with bug fixing and continuous optimization, while also preparing the build for pre-certification at Microsoft, while our tech artists basically finished the initial round of visual enhancements and started polishing, adding some extra eye candy, and optimizing things. This stage lasted for a month and was concluded with us delivering a stable, somewhat bug-free build and sending it to pre-check. And finally, our release candidate, basically another month for polishing the game across the board and the final round of optimization, concluded with the game's release on Xbox Series X and S. Time was a huge factor here, as mentioned before. We really wanted to have the game ready in time for Hellblade's 4th anniversary. So, we've submitted the build on July 30th, and due to some undisclosed shenanigans, as you may know, this was the peak of the pandemic, the results came back pretty late, so on August 9th, with the game being scheduled to release on the very same day, August 9th. That was the Hellblade's anniversary date. So yeah, talking about tight schedule. Okay, so once the game was released on Xbox, we moved to PC. That was easy. We basically merged all the visual enhancements we already did, and then started adding some extra PC flair, such as several ray tracing quality presets, NVIDIA's DLSS, AMD's FSR, and the ability to run the game in both DirectX 11 and 12. This stage lasted for about 3 months, including the additional accessibility package we've prepared for the game, which was then patched back onto the Xbox version. The accessibility package contained a wide variety of subtitle options such as color, transparency, size, as well as full controller remapping for all platforms, and mono sound option, and several color blindness presets. So yeah, so that was it. That was our schedule. So, having covered the basics, let's have a look at some of the visual enhancements we did. Starting with the obvious, which is the ray trace reflections. You're gonna see a couple of screenshots right now, or movie clips with transition going, with various shenanigans, so just, yeah, focus. All right, so this was an obvious improvement, visible from the very beginning of the game. Even though the Viking world of Hellblade is not your token neon city, as featured in every ad every ray tracing ad out there, still it's got plenty of water, right? So water means plenty of opportunities for the light to bounce and scatter. Of course, the original Hellblade wasn't made with ray tracing in mind, so we had to be extra careful when implementing it. We've set up new dedicated volumes dedicated to ray tracing calculations, plug them into the variant manager, and then place them at the top of the priority list. Basically, we've built the ray tracing layer on top of the existing game, while retaining the ability to turn it on and off at will, and also to overwrite anything that's located beneath it. So this way we avoided interfering with the base structure of the game. Here's another take from our proof of concept level of choice, the Swamp Shard trial. That was the first effect that we actually noticed in the game. An interesting thing is that the ray trace reflections have been applied not only to completely smooth surfaces, such as water, but also to every object having a low roughness value. So for instance, all metals in the game. Again, maybe with the current light, you will see a small snippet on a buckle on Senua's lap right there. Not sure whether that's at all visible, but yeah, okay, it's there. Well, that in itself posed another problem, as pretty early on we've noticed that there are some major inconsistencies in reflection brightness on some actors. So as it turned out, we've had to rework roughness for virtually all in-game materials, which brings us to roughness adjustment. So yeah, we've had to enhance roughness for every material instance used in the game. It was absolutely necessary, not only for the ray trace reflections to work properly, but also it allowed us to squeeze out every last bit of detail from the environment. Well, I guess that's one of those changes that is not immediately visible, but add heaps of detail to the image, especially when coupled with good quality reflections. I guess you've seen the transition. In case you didn't, I'll just move it back and forth, right? Yup, yup, yup. Well, this is when you can see the transition, right? We basically had to alter every material on any level first before getting down to adjusting lights and volumetric effects. In terms of passes, we've had a material pass first, usually focused on roughness, but also covering other settings, followed by lights and color correction pass. Then any new visual enhancement that was present on any given map would get a pass of its own, and we would usually tie everything together with a final pass. Well, it took forever to complete this task, as the original roughness had this high contrast value, right? Almost black and white with very little in between. You can see it on the left side of the screen. So our idea for correcting this was to create a material function and plug it into every master material used in the game. This way, our tech artists could tweak roughness parameters for every material instance separately. And after creating the basic functionality for a roughness enhancement, we've added some additional options, such as optimizing the materials for reflections or a real-time wetness system. And as a convenience tool, did it just, yeah, cool. As a convenience tool, we've also added a debug option for marking materials with different colors, so that our tech artists could know which instances were done versus which ones are still to be covered. Okay, moving to light and color correction. This is obviously another change that is visible in every screenshot included in this presentation, but yeah, let me showcase some of the lighting changes. By the way, if you look at this gate here, you will see the improvement that the reflections brought to the metal surfaces. I guess that's a better example than a buckle. All right, so basically we felt that some colors were too vibrant, and in turn, some objects stood out too much from the surrounding environment. So reworking lights and colors helped us achieve a more grounded and realistic look. We have desaturated some colors, thus bringing the scene closer together, while also, thanks to reworked roughness, emphasizing a lot of detail hidden in the environment. Basically, our aim was to make the light behave in a more natural way. We wanted it to scatter more, to cast realistic shadows, basically to look like the real deal. And go forward. Okay, funny thing is that the method of calculating light and fog changed together with the updated engine. Yeah, we've moved past 10 versions of Unreal, right? So our tech artists had to tweak a lot of the settings manually. In order to make that possible, we have added several additional correction values. Out of need for compromise, our tech artists often veered toward a greater realism. Coupled with roughness enhancement, this had a huge effect on the ground cover. You're gonna see the transition again. Well, basically in the original game, there were some spots where the grass or foliage in general would appear either over or under saturated. So reworking the light helped us bring these elements closer together. The entire vegetation suddenly felt more grounded and natural, with each blade of grass and every leaf being lit in a realistic manner. Whoops. Okay, we talked about lights. Let's check what hides in the shadows. So this was one of the first visual enhancements we decided to add. The ideas for improvement came one after another. First, the flicker effect, then changing the color of the flame ever so slightly, so it's warmer in appearance, and then adding the dynamic shadows. Initially, we were quite happy with the performance and paid little mind to optimization. The end result looked much better, while remaining relatively cheap in terms of milliseconds. There were only a couple of oil lamps per level, or so we thought, but as we applied this effect all across the game, so not only to lamps but also torches, braziers, fireplaces, so basically to every dynamic light source, well, we quickly realized that there are in fact multiple places in the game with a lot of lights placed in close vicinity. So lights interacting, shadows overlapping, and the GPU cost going up significantly. So we had to bite the bullet, and initially this effect was done using the original cascaded shadow maps, and they were really taxing whenever there were like a couple of light sources next to each other. So we had to, at some point, rework this entire effect using distance field soft shadows. And not only the end result looked much better, having the shadow becoming gradually smoother the further away it were from the light source, but also actually much cheaper in terms of GPU usage. Yes, we barely managed to fit them into Xbox's memory, but they were actually much, much cheaper to render. So yeah, we feel that the end result looks much better, and especially making all the interiors much more grounded and immersive. Okay, talked about fire. That's time for water. Okay, as with many other improvements, this wasn't even planned in the first place. But with ray tracing on, you can see it. The water surface looked a bit off, especially on two maps, featuring stormy weather and an open sea. Did it just, okay. The original water had this peculiar oily sheen, right? It wasn't bad by any means, but we decided to try and make it better. Naturally, the entire team quickly jumped on board and started providing new tweaks and ideas. At one point, I actually took a trip to the sea during storm, just to record the behavior of waves during such weather, right? The peaks, the bumps, the wrinkles, the foam, the transparency. So that helped us pinpoint what we were aiming at the initial stage. Well, our artists obviously took the matter to their hearts and couldn't settle on good enough, right? They had to make it perfect. And in my humble opinion, they did. As a foundation for the new water system, our tech artists used Was the hiccup? Okay, it works now. I can rewind that slide. Give me a sec. All right. Yeah, so that was the foundation for the reworked water surface. Our tech artists used Ryan Brax's Gerstner wave function presented in a GDC talk a couple years back, albeit with a small alteration, which was masking the visible... It's playing tricks on me, right? The one alteration was masking the visible patterns with a purling curl noise. The final material uses 6 Gerstner waves along with a bunch of different settings for added variety. The water mesh has also been remade. Detail maps were used, height lerp for the foam, subsurface scattering for the color, and a set of scalar params for reflections, and that's the new water. But the single biggest difference in our approach versus the original was an attempt to recreate a natural waves behavior in vertex shader instead of just faking it. Did you notice that? When I'm looking away, it starts to, yeah. Okay. And for all you curious minds out there, I realize that we are mostly producers here probably, but for all you curious minds out there, this is how it's been done on the material level. And that's the overview of the Gerstner wave. Well, even though the implementation took a wee bit longer than expected, as it took many more iterations that we were initially planning for, we are super happy with the end result. All right, now for something a little bit more gory. Shortly after finishing the water shader, our tech artists moved into the Sea of Corpses. If improving the stormy water was an exercise in their ambition, then these bloody shallows of the Sea of Corpses quickly became their holy grail. For a nightmarish hellscape, that is, the Sea of Corpses, we felt that the original blood surface looked a bit underwhelming. We wanted to make it gory and terrifying. So the Sea of Corpses quickly became our favorite map, and we wanted to make it look awesome. Or in other words, we wanted to make it look metal. So one of our tech artists even admitted to have taken inspiration from some of his favorite death metal album covers, such as Colony by In Flames. Move forward, please. Okay, so being super happy with how the water shader turned out, yet again, we decided to give our tech artists free rein. Just total freedom to do whatever you want. Just go nuts about it. And bottom line, obviously, Ninja Theory would have to approve of the changes. So, needless to say, they liked it. I vaguely remember a long... What's going on there? Like, really? Cool, okay, sorry for the hiccups. I remember long discussions about blood clots and the process of coagulation among our tech artists. So yeah, when they finally, because we've been seeing the iterations, right? The effect was getting gradually better and better, but when they finally showcased the end result to us, well, yeah, it took us a long while to pick up our jaws. Okay, so the biggest improvement here lied in remaking the blood surface shader, right? As the original was rather simple. The guys created a new blood material in Substance Designer, and then a shader was built around it, hiding tile patterns and adding some variety. On top of it, some Gerstner waves were used again with the effect for water ripples, for simulating raindrops. Another challenge lied in creating a better transition between the surface of the blood and the landscape layer. You can see that's the original version, that's the reworked version. So we wanted to make it smoother. So our artists created a simplified version of the blood material as a landscape layer and then painted in manually all over the map. Then use some height lerp for a better transition between the layers. Okay, that covers the Sea of Corpses. Improved algae, that's one of the best features you can ever add to your game. So, you've seen this already. the amount of algae has been greatly increased inside the swamp, basically to cover these awful transitions between objects, right? The algae is basically an additional layer inside the material using projection in both X and Y axis instead of the default UV coordinates. Then, as with everything, a nice blending was added to fix the transition between the layers, basically the layer of the swamp and all objects submerged in it. So as you can see here, wooden beams, rocks, structures, vegetation, corpses, every single bit of geometry has been affected by this, getting caked with algae. Going forward, well, Senua's footprints. All right, that's not a big improvement, but a tiny detail we've decided to add, and a latecomer to the party. Basically, once we finished the initial round of enhancements, we sat down, taken a breather, and started brainstorming again. Someone came up with the idea of footprints. Yeah, it turned out it's an easy feature to implement. It's a small thing, kind of hard to notice. You need to like watch behind your back, but it's there. All right, moving on to interactive foliage. Well, it just feels right when vegetation reacts to the player, right? Initially, we were quite certain that not many people will notice it. Well, this is a tiny feature, right? And the camera is fixed quite close to Senua's back at all times. Well, surprisingly, the players did notice it, and they kind of went mental about it, as the social media exploded with praise, and yeah, we were laughing together with ninjas, talking that, well, yeah, we could just drop ray tracing. This is the single most important feature added to the game. And this is how it looked under the hood. No skeletal meshes were used here. Instead, our tech artist created a 3D capsule mask placed around Senua's position and lifted the lower hemisphere slightly above the ground so that the static meshes got the gradients this way. Then they just translated Senua's movement into bend direction, and that was an easy way of adding it. Okay, now we've started drenching Senua's clothes. Well, there are several places in the game where Senua traverses through bodies of water, but sadly it had no effect on her appearance. So yeah, we've decided to make her clothes get wet when moving in and out of water. That's a tiny, tiny little detail, but our tech artists had a lot of fun adding it. And of course, how could Senua's clothes get wet when moving through water and not get drenched in blood when traversing the sea of corpses? Well, this being our favorite level and a bit of obsession at this point, we immediately sat down to adding the blood-soaked effect. So that's just another bit of environmental consistency. Well, this time with an R rating, I guess. All right, so that brings us to the star of the show, Senua. As mentioned at the very beginning, initially we agreed not to alter Senua's pawn in any direct way. She's the highlight of the game, after all, an iconic character. She's present in every cutscene, an excellent performance by Melina Jurgens, just perfect the way she is. But, oh, moved backwards instead of forwards. Okay, so, but her looks were affected in an indirect way by improving the environment she's in. So all the lights, volumetric effects, reflections, materials, every little thing contributed to her looking better. I believe the only thing we ended up changing in her actual model was fixing a shade under her eyelids, as that bothered one of our technical artists. So that's how we managed to make her and the many cutscenes she's in look better while avoiding the risk of accidentally breaking something, mainly breaking the very subjective thing that is her presence and charisma. So that's an epitome of making it the same but better, really. Okay, so I'm going to check. Ooh, we're running out of time. So this is a high-level list of all the things we've done in terms of visuals. Yeah, we are running out of time, so I'm not going to read it all. Just leave it for to hover for a couple seconds, and let's move on. Okay, so we are approaching the end of this presentation, so I guess it's time for some final thoughts. So what have we learned? How do you approach a project like this? How do you answer the initial question? How do you make it the same but better? So, first, start small and begin building upwards. Focus on details and avoid the urge of changing too much too fast, because later on that's really hard to revert. Focus on what's already there and try to improve it. Enhance is the key word here really, as you don't want to change stuff just for the sake of changing stuff. Maintain visual parity, both in terms of gameplay cues and very subjective ambience. Monitor performance from day one. Don't be like us. Yeah, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a relatively inexpensive feature. It's either cheap or expensive. Things that may seem fine at the time can quickly add up with other features being added down the line. So fight furiously for each and every millisecond. Encourage feedback. Have your engineers involved in visual enhancements and have your technical artists involved in optimization. Try to make the entire team cooperate. Every pair of eyes is precious, basically. And then iterate, never settle on good enough. If something that you're working on seems taxing, just put it on a shelf, give it a couple of days rest, and then come back to it. And obviously, you can always ask for feedback, and you may see new opportunities. Then iterate some more. And when you're finally happy with it, consider another iteration just in case. Yeah, I realize that this last bit might seem highly controversial to other project managers and producers out there. Well, how do you plan for that? But truly, you cannot put a deadline on creativity. I invite you all to watch John Cleese's speech on creativity in management. He describes something he calls an open operating mode. Basically, a state of mind encouraging experimentation for the sake of fun. So, none of the visual enhancements we ended up adding were planned for. Initially, we only had a very vague idea of improving the game's presentation, mainly by adding ray tracing. So all the awesome improvements, enhancements came about via exploration, experimentation, and exchanging ideas. So if you want to plan ahead for creativity, I guess try to plan with leeways in mind. Okay, so how did we do? Chapter selection, finally. Well, that's how the player base reacted after the game's release on Xbox Series X and S. The reception has been overwhelmingly positive, and the social media exploded in praise. I guess there was like, Hellblade hashtag was trending on Twitter for 2 days, so yeah. Okay, oh, that's it. Okay, so you arrived at the show. Thank you all for listening. Do we still have some time for Q&A?
Yeah, of course, we have some.
Do you guys have any questions?
Right. So, have you consulted the Ninja Theory team about your changes to keep the parity up?
Yes. The thing is that, as I said before, we've enjoyed a great deal of freedom and trust from them. But yeah, ninjas were involved at every stage of the project. We've been having weekly syncs with them, and each and every map and each and every visual enhancement was sent to them before for approval. And yeah, we've got a couple of remarks and feedback was added to the game. But basically the thing is that they initially asked us to prepare a version, optimized version for the new consoles, and if possible add ray tracing. And they also said, if you guys have any ideas, go for it. So yeah, so we took that to our hearts and started adding new ideas. But yeah, each idea, the proof of concept build, that was in the first stage, we added a lot of the things or just initial versions of our features, such as the first version of the layer of algae and the dynamic shadows. We presented it to them. They said, "Awesome, go for it." So that's how we did it. But yeah, they were being consulted at every stage of the project up until the very end. Cool.
Any?
Hey, did you manage to test, because you mentioned the changes were made organically by the team as they were explored. did you manage to test everything in the pre-production, or was it still ongoing?
No, no, that was an ongoing process. We managed to test it in pre-production, but only limited to the Swamp Shard trial, the single map. And well, the game is very varied. Well, it is consistent in terms of visual direction. But if you compare the Swamp Shard trial with the Sea of Corpses, well, it's a totally different level, right, in terms of presentation. So we could, obviously, like the settings for ray tracing, for the reflections, for materials, that was carried over to other maps. But the Blood Surface was something totally new. So the idea was to split the game into chunks, assign each chunk to a technical artist, and just tell him to go mental, right? Do whatever you want. We'll see the result. Once you're happy with it, we'll show it to ninjas, ask them for approval, and then we'll start implementing it. The thing is, we at least we tried to never ask questions such as, how long will it take? We asked questions such as, will it look good? Do you feel confident with adding it? Will it not break anything? Will you manage to do it like before release? So these were the questions. So we try to encourage experimentation, so that, because if you have a hard deadline over your head, you try to finish something really fast. So be done with it and move to another task. But if you see that, it's your thing to add, right? If you want something cool, add it. Okay. First some stutters on the screen. Now we have this squeaking noise, but cool. I hope that answers the question.
Yes. May I have a follow-up?
Sorry?
May I have a follow-up?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Was there anything that that looked promising but you had to cut because of the schedule and
Well,
other limitations?
give me a second. Okay. The most important thing, I guess, was that initially we've had this stupid idea to create a new skin for Senua. Because basically to give an option to the players for the remastered version to pick another skin that was that was closer to the one, the makeup she's using in the trailer for the sequel, right? But yeah, we dropped that pretty quickly. Another thing where the fire shader, we're considering adding it, but during our initial test, just didn't look as good. And the third thing was optimizing ray tracing reflections. So we've had to cut some corners in terms of resolution, but luckily the denoiser on Xbox just kind of covered the slightly lower resolution than the one we were aiming for. But that's it. Most of the features we were initially thinking about ended up in the actual game. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. And my question is about the audio layer, because it was off the table from the Ninja Theory, or where you didn't think about it? Because
it was off the table because, well, one of the biggest features, well, the two big features in Hellblade, like not talking about the story and all these extra values, but the two big technical features were the mocap and binaural audio. So no, same as with Senua, don't touch it, else you break it, right? So that was our initial idea. We were super stressed when implementing the mono sound option for accessibility purposes. Yeah, we were just really going too far with testing it, being super afraid not to break something. Especially, you've played the Hellblade, right? You know the furies in your head. That's an experience of its own, right? And they even encourage you to play the game using headphones. So yeah, if you know the audio in this game, don't touch it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what was the point I was asking for. Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks for the
Thank
answer.
you.
Any other questions? No. So thank you very much again,
Cool.
Patryk.